Hi, it's Kevin May here in the PhocusWire Studio at the Phocuswright Conference 2021. Delighted to be joined, thank you, by Liselotte De Maar. You are the Managing Director for Travel in North America for Accenture. So I appreciate you spending some time with us on the last day here at the conference. Okay, so we've done a fair amount of work with Accenture this year. I interviewed your colleague Emily Weiss in May and June. It was a great chat, but what I thought would be quite useful for us today is just to go through some other points that have come up over the course of this year and just get your perspective. Is that okay?
Of course, yes.
Right, so one of the key things that I've been reading in some of the reports and the articles that you've written for us is it's this idea that everybody should be data-driven and nimble. And you hear that a lot when you go to a conference, especially from, at a technology conference. Everyone claims to be very data-driven and nimble, but the reality is often quite removed from that. Would you agree?
It is. I think the attention to data and how do you use it is increasing. Mm-hmm. Are we in the travel industry in the best place we can be yet? I think there's a long way to go. I think the importance of data in travel and learning about our customers and the travelers is of more importance, and the reason why is a lot of the data and logic that we knew pre-pandemic actually isn't true anymore.
Yeah.
Travel patterns have been changing, guest preferences have been changing, the way we're flying, the days we're flying have been changing. So we basically have to relearn some of those behaviors from the travelers to actually make the right offer, to be relevant in the market, and to win the customer back after the pandemic. So I think there is still a way to go to really know your customer, because one thing is, I think travel companies sit on a lot of data.
Yeah.
It's not about the availability of data. It is how do you use it and how do you make it relevant to making your offers and running your business.
As a kind of a follow-up to that, it's interesting. I mean, the industry is not known for being nimble.
No.
Traditionally, and I would suggest that over the last 20 months they've learned to be a little bit more nimble and react to things. But there is so much planning involved in whether it's aviation, whether it's organising your revenue management strategy for a hotel. There's so many things that you have to do. Do you sense that the industry has become quicker at changing its strategy because it's had to, or do they have to rely on, like you said, old data?
I think my answer is kind of twofold. I think they realize they have to be more flexible, whether it comes to their costs, whether it comes to responding to demand and what demand is coming back or not, or a new outbreak of COVID somewhere, and how do you adjust schedules or hotel availability. So I think the realization of being more flexible and how to deal with that increased over the past year. Are we being more flexible? Again, I think that there is still some steps to be taken, but I do see some changes in, how can we be more flexible in scaling our organization, for instance?
Yeah.
How can we be more flexible in actually adjusting to the demand? And some of it is hard, right? So airplanes, you don't buy and sell on the spot, and it's not as easy of that. If you see the car rental industry, they sold off a lot of cars to get their balance sheet healthy, and then all of a sudden there's a semiconductor shortage and it's very hard to buy them back now. So it's flexibility and it's the nimbleness that is required, but it's also really good scenario planning and business planning on where can I be very flexible and be nimble to what's happening outside of the organization, and where do we also have to face that this industry has fixed assets that are hard to swap out.
Sure. And I suppose related to that, and another slogan or a phrase that gets used a lot is collaborating is key. Yeah. And again, a bit like being nimble, collaboration is something perhaps that the industry is not famous for doing traditionally. Do you sense what's happened over the last, 20 months has forced companies to think about how they can be more collaborative and work with partners?
I think they have, and I think that's actually a huge opportunity in the travel industry. I think when we looked, I had conversations with clients pre-pandemic a couple of years ago, where everybody talked about we want to operate in an ecosystem, we want to be a platform, we want to be a marketplace. However, the red line in those conversations at the time is, but I want to be in the center. And if everybody wants to, recognizes that they want to be partnerships, but if everybody wants to be in the center, it's pretty hard to actually accomplish that.
Yeah.
I do think that I see more collaboration, referring for instance to Corinne with Clear yesterday on stage.
Yeah.
The partners that, for instance, Clear has been able to connect because people need a health certificate and make it easy and seamless and frictionless to travel in this time. So I do see an increased focus, but also willingness to really think about partnerships in more open ways. And I think in the end that serves the traveler, because we talked about frictionless and seamless journeys for so long. You need multiple partners to actually accomplish that for you, because otherwise you keep having 10 apps and 6 search firms, and then also so you in the end need partners around you and play in your own core and use the partners that are along those traveler journeys to actually make the unique proposition in the market.
Okay. So your clients, they'll be coming to you, and one of the things they always ask organisations like Accenture is, tell us what the long game is here, because your role as a management consultancy and an advisory firm is to almost ask them to just move the clouds away that they kind of wade through and look at what's on the horizon. So what would you say, Liselotte, is some of the things that they should be looking at? Big picture stuff now.
Big picture stuff. I think really define, there is something about really define what your unique play and proposition in the market is, because that drills into data and partnership, etc. You cannot be everything to everybody, and so the answer per client is also different, because it depends on what's your customer base, what's your brand portfolio, how do you want to grow, where do you want to expand, what's the proposition that belongs to that. So big picture is really define what you want to be when you grow up, basically.
Right,
and
okay.
and part of that is quite a few conversations are around what is our future identity or uniqueness in the market, and how do we make sure that we align our business with our propositions, with our partners, with everything around it to really play on that string. So that's one. Secondly is how do you go in, how do you play into some of the new customer trends that relate to travel? How do you infuse them in your business? We've seen price and quality or price and location always been a primary driver. What we have actually seen from customer pulse surveys in the past, basically 18 months, is that some of those drivers are changing, and that is around liquid expectation. If you have a really good experience in retail, you expect a similar expectation in travel, and going back on the road, you actually start to wonder, why are things the way they are, and how can you play into those liquid expectations? Seamless, frictionless, and big play is also how do you let technology work for you, and how do you treat that as an enabler for your vision. Technology in itself it's never a goal in itself. It needs to help you. Like data technology, you need to get those things right. And where the travel industry is also unfortunately known for is that we're running on a lot of big legacy systems that are hard to change. So big picture is definitely, when you figure out what you want to be when you grow up, when you know what are the trends that are influencing your customer behavior, how do you align the enabling technology and data underlying to make that effective in the market, and how do you do that dynamically, but also how do you create that nimbleness? How do you make sure that you're not creating another legacy system that you're stuck in, which prevents you from being nimble in the future? How do you also build, sometimes you use event-driven architecture, but how are you going to make sure that all those enabling factors are also dynamically adjustable to make sure you also for the future create a more flexible and nimble future.
I thought one of the examples that Karen from Clear was talking about with me yesterday, when she was saying, expectations now have changed.
They
to
are.
your point,
Yeah.
and the example that we were discussing was that we're so used to everything being not only digital, as because we've behaved like digital people for the last 20 months, is that now there is this. Why do we have to turn up at the airport 2.5 hours before? All of a sudden that just seems really crazy, whereas we kind of accepted it before.
Yep.
And I think that's perhaps, you ask anybody in the travel industry, what's the biggest pain point that still remains? And they always say, it's the airport experience.
Yeah.
But that's a tough one to really, really change, isn't it?
It is. And a couple of years ago, like Clear, we have been working on digital identities and how can you actually make that journey more frictionless. There is a thing that we can change on, because there are so many habits and so many rules, but there's also, it's a very legislative industry.
Yeah.
And so one is, change doesn't come easy with a lot of legislation, and a lot of that is for good reasons, right? It's to keep us safe and to make sure we can all continue to travel safe. What I do think is like solutions like digital identity, biometrics, etc., are helping to both remove the friction and still keep us safe. So I think the state of the technology, the way we are more used to it and getting more comfortable with it, because we had to over the last 18 months, will probably help some of that. Will all of it be removed? Well, I hope so. I dream of it sometimes, but it will be still also a tough physical structure to get through with a lot of people at the same time. What might actually help is some of the patterns have been changing. We're not all flying out on Monday morning and coming back on Thursday night, right? So we see some of the patterns changing, but you can also drive flow. So I do think there is a lot of technology out there that can ease some of that.
Yeah.
And to your point, do we need to be there 30 minutes ahead of time? Are we really? Well, I'm terrible at that, so I will not. I have so many near misses. I won't tell you about it. But do we have to? But it's like, do you need to check out of a hotel? There are a couple of these habits that we have that are hard to say goodbye to for some reason, but I think we need to challenge ourselves in that space and say, what would an easy journey look like, and how can we change some of those? We're forever used to it. Maybe we can change it.
Yeah, and maybe it will be consumers that demand it rather than the industry thinking through it itself, arguably, possibly.
Probably, and it might be influence coming from outside the industry, right? Yeah. What we said with the liquid expectations, and if I can order with Amazon and my stuff comes in the same day, why is it so hard to book a cruise travel and I still need somebody to call somebody to change my flight, etc. Sometimes the push comes from other industry, and that's the consumers saying, if I can get my stuff from Amazon the same day, why is it so hard to do a seamless digital journey within the travel industry?
Okay, Liselotte De Maar from Accenture, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome.